Good evening and welcome to The Bench, where we are taking you inside the Gerald Goines murder trial. Goines is a former Houston police narcotics officer who is accused of falsifying documents to get a no-knock raid warrant for a home on Harding Street. That raid killed Regina Nicholas, Dennis Tuttle, and their family dog. 4 officers were also shot, another injured. Tonight, we have a powerhouse of legal analysts joining us to break down this case. First, we have KPRC2's Mario Diaz, who has been investigating, looking at this over the last 5 years. Next to him, we have Rick DeToto, former Harris County prosecutor turned defense attorney who was involved in the Antonio A.J. Armstrong Jr. trial, the subject of our first show, The Bench. And to his right, we actually also have next to me, we have Kevin Petroff, a former Harrison Galveston County prosecutor, now a defense attorney. Kevin was featured on the evidence room in the Savagery at Corvette Concepts episode just last season. And in the middle, Casey Gonzalez, a former homicide division chief for the Harris County District Attorney's Office, now a defense attorney specializing in murder trials. Welcome to each and every single one of you. Thanks so much for being here. Mario, before we get to the case and the trial, we need to get all the players who are involved. Let's first talk about Gerald Goines and just his career.
Well, Gerald Goines is the man who has been charged with the murder of these 2 homeowners, right? But before he actually found himself in this situation on Harding Street, Keith, he was viewed as someone that the department knew for several years in narcotics. He had been a part of that division dating back to the 90s. He was known as an officer that got things done when it came to narcotics arrest. He also is somebody who was close to former Mayor Bob Lanier. In fact, his wife is inside the courtroom every single day supporting Gerald Goines.
Bob Lanier's wife.
Yes, Lisa Lanier. So he is someone that is not a stranger. And if you remember when we found ourselves in this situation in the night of January of 2019, you had former Chief Art Acevedo talking about the main case agent here. He's a big teddy bear. He's a big guy. We all know him. He's just a gentle giant. Well, that gentle giant, that big guy that everybody knew, well, he's now the man who's finding himself having to defend himself for murder.
Okay, next we want to talk about Judge Veronica Nelson. Casey, what can you tell us about her? We know that she's making sure prosecutors and the defense follow the laws and what's agreed to before trial.
Well, I would start off by saying she is no nonsense. She is tough, but I believe she's fair. She will listen to the arguments coming from both sides, the state and the defense, and I think she will follow the law. Most importantly, she will maintain control of her courtroom. And when you have the caliber of attorneys that you have trying this case, you have to have a judge who can maintain control, or it will quickly turn into a circus.
Most definitely. Okay, all right, next, Kevin, we want to talk about the prosecution. What can you tell us about Tanisha Manning and Keaton Forge?
Well, both are experienced prosecutors. They've both had big verdicts come out of that office. I've worked with Tanisha on training prosecutors, both in that office and throughout the state. Keaton Forge has tried a lot of high-profile cases recently, all with excellent verdicts. So they absolutely know what they're doing and have taken command of that courtroom, I think, very early on.
Okay, Rick, perhaps the most significant member of Goines' defense team, Nicole DeBoard. What should we know about her?
Yes, sir. I've known Nicole for about 20 years now. I've worked with her as a prosecutor. I've worked with her husband as a prosecutor. She's smart, she's tough, and she's likable. And those are the 3 things that you need as a trial attorney to try these cases in front of juries. This is a tough case for her, but she's very experienced, and I believe she's going to do a great job.
Okay. All right. It's important to note that everyone in this trial was put under a gag order. Body cameras are another big point in this case. As Mario reported yesterday and today, the former police chief, Art Acevedo, told officers to turn off their body cameras. Mario, this really exploded today. Tell us about the response to all of that.
It exploded on several fronts. Let's talk about what we learned yesterday in court and what we saw on video. You saw the former Houston Police Department chief, and you're smiling, but I mean, you look at it from a defense perspective, all of you see him literally ordering an officer to turn off his body camera. This is the one element that an officer wears that captures evidence, that can really show the truth. He says, turn it off. And then today we come to find out through the testimony of Stephen Bryant, Gerald Goines' partner for several years, that Acevedo was on the scene, and he recalls him telling officers to turn off the body cameras, and he recalls officers doing just that. And then this afternoon, we had written a report about this to get people's perspectives. I know you weighed in on this yesterday, Rick. You talked about it as an attorney, and it was your initial response, and then I'm going to tell what happened today. Your thoughts on this initially?
Well, it's a problem. I mean, you have the police chief telling officers within 45 minutes of the scene not being secure to turn off their cameras. And as I talked about it yesterday, those body cams are evidence.
Right.
And they're not being seen by the jury. So I guess if I was a defense attorney in this case, part of my closing argument would be, why did they not investigate the chief for those actions?
Keith, it's preservation of that fresh evidence. That's what those cameras can do. And he said, turn it off. So today we learned that there might have been another camera used at the scene that was actually a personal camera of an officer. We weren't able to identify exactly in terms of the court, does that camera really exist in the video? And that was testified to. But then this afternoon, you had Chief Art Acevedo say, hey, listen, I was following policy back then. And he went to social media and essentially wanted to criticize our comments, our reporting through his commentary. Here's Chief Art Acevedo. I'm going to put the tweet up if we have it, but it just basically shows that he says that we were engaging in sensationalism and journalism.
Right,
yeah, and I lack journalistic integrity. However, we notice that this behavior continues to be unchecked. And then he goes on to add that this is important to look at this policy that he highlights at the bottom about the reason why you can turn off a body camera is because it can be approved by a supervisor on extended scenes. Extended scenes do not include scenes that have ongoing activity with suspects or when the scene is not fully contained and under control. And that's what we're examining here, because those cameras were turned off 43 minutes after this raid went down. This was not a contained scene, according to law enforcement sources that I've been speaking to. We know that SWAT was still going to that scene. We know that for hours thereafter, Houstonians were told there might be suspects inside of this house. It was not secured. Furthermore, when a person tells somebody, meaning a chief, say, turn off the camera right now, did that person actually ask for approval? No, that was a directive. He said it can't be approved. That officer never asked to have his camera turned off. That's where the policy comes into play right now, and that's what attorneys like yourself have questions about.
Yeah, Casey, I want to bring you in on this and get your take on all of this because, of course, we're talking about procedure here with the whole camera and it being asked to be turned off.
Yes. So my greatest concern here is that you have a scene that is still ongoing. And it's my understanding that there were actually officers still being treated by EMS personnel on scene. So this is not an extended scene at this time. You still have witnesses, the officers who were raiding that house on scene. So at no point should these body cameras have been turned off.
Yeah. Oh, go. Yes, please.
Mario mentioned that the SWAT team was on the way. So the SWAT team is on the way to the location, and the chief of police is directing officers to turn off their body cameras. That makes no sense at all.
Yeah, well, I was there that night, and I remember, heading there. Of course, they're not going to tell the media everything that they know, and of course, in the breaking news situation, things change. But when we got there, we were told that there was a standoff that was taking place, and several officers had been shot, and there were at least 2 individuals who were part of the standoff that were in there, still possibly firing at police. And so this was several hours after the initial call.
And Keith, when you learned of that, was it daytime or nighttime?
It was still daytime. Yeah, it was still daytime.
But it went into the night.
It went into the night, well into the night, yes.
Right.
It was close to 10 o'clock before we started to get a little more of what had really happened.
I asked that because the cameras were asked to be turned off 43 minutes after this raid, and it was still daylight.
Wow, okay.
Well, and my bigger concern here is that you have 2 separate entities investigating this case. You have the Houston Police Department, and you also have the Harris County District Attorney's Office. So why was that personal body camera footage that we found out about in court today never obtained by either one of those entities?
Kevin, it's obvious you have a point here. Jump in.
I think that they have compounded this problem, not just by turning off the body cam, but the way that this came forward to the jury, because it did not come from the prosecution. It was only when the defense said, wait, hold on, we want to play this entire video, did the jury see Acevedo say, turn off the body cams. And that, I think, can critically hurt the credibility of the state in this. As they say they're going against a police agency, that they can be trusted even though this officer can't. And now I think that's to be determined.
And Rick, very quickly, does the narrative you see in that tweet and the policy, does it match up with what's being said?
It makes no sense. And just quickly, I think the chief of police needs to sit his butt in the witness stand and be subject to cross-examination, and that'll resolve all these problems.
Really? You think Art Acevedo should be brought in and
Absolutely.
and be forced to answer questions?
It's become a big issue in this case. And I think he should sit down, he should be subpoenaed and answer questions, and we'll figure out what happened.
Is it too late for that to happen since the trial's already started? That can still happen.
They can still subpoena him.
Can he take the fifth in that situation?
He can, if he wants to, but it's going to introduce a whole new wrinkle in this case.
Even after the evidence was played in court like that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the raid itself. We know, of course, that night Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas both killed, also along with their family pet. Mario, walk us through what led to the no-knock warrant in the first place.
Well, what happened was you had a 911 call made just a few weeks before that. It was around January the 8th. It was a neighbor of the Nicholas and Tuttle homeowners. And they said, listen, we believe that my daughter's inside that room, inside that house doing drugs. And then they called back again and saying there was drugs going on around. So there was these 911 calls, and you had HPD respond. In the immediate response, you had one particular officer, Nicole Blankenship Reeves. She was on the stand early on, along with another officer, Morales. And they responded, and they said what they saw that night. They weren't really sure. But Reeves decided to take very detailed notes about this call and what she saw. And then she took those notes, and she didn't go to her immediate supervisor. Remember, she's a patrol officer. She didn't go to her supervisor of patrol. She went to the lieutenant of the narcotics division, who then decided to text that information and pass that information along to Gerald Goines. Now, why it came out, why did she go from this role in patrol to the lieutenant of narcotics? Well, they were in a relationship.
Okay.
They're a couple. They've lived together. So that's why. And she left the note at the home in passing. They didn't really see each other too much, so she left the note right there. And then from there, the information got to Gerald Goines. Gerald Goines began investigating the house, starting to, again, he says he was investigating the house. That's what he put into the warrant. And they started building this case, and then around the day before, on January the 27th, he claims that he actually made a purchase at the home. And that's where they had the drugs, and that's where he got the probable cause to go before Judge Markham, and get the warrant signed to bring in everybody from the narcotics division to come in and go into that house and show that these people were drug dealers. But what's intriguing now is that warrant that you're seeing on the screen, it's been blasted out of the waters being completely bogus. And that's what he's being charged with. He's charged with felony tampering with a government document because, according to the own defense team, there are some things in that warrant that just aren't panning out. And you're not going to like Gerald Goines because of that. But you shouldn't be looking at him for being a murderer. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the warrant has been debunked now on the stand by an HPD senior investigator from the Special Investigations Unit, as well as his partner, Stephen Bryant, who said this was not true. This did not really happen. And what did they really pin this on in terms of saying this is not accurate here with Gerald Goines is that they found a receipt inside of his vehicle for the Taste of Texas, the restaurant. Why is that important? Because he told investigators, I made a buy at that house in the evening the night before. When they go search his car, they find this receipt for Taste of Texas from the night before. So the investigator, doing his job, goes and gets security video from Taste of Texas. And who do you see walking around enjoying their dinner? Gerald Goines.
Yeah, not a lot of deals go down at Taste of Texas, as far as we know. Yes, all right, Kevin, you've been a prosecutor for most of your career in 2 different counties. Tell us, how hard is it to get one of these no-knock warrants?
So it's relatively easy. All it really requires is an officer be able, within the affidavit, to explain why knocking and announcing your presence before entry could either cause danger to the police officers or cause destruction of evidence. Clearly, this was supposed to really focus on officer safety. If you know that there's someone armed inside of a house waiting for police to come in there that's going to take shots at police, then that makes more sense. What we've seen over time, though, is it's really been focused more on, well, they could destroy evidence. They could start flushing drugs if there's drugs inside the house. And so what I think we've seen is an abuse where that was just simply made a part of all or many warrants.
And part of this, and these are just some of the warrants tied to this case that we're holding up. These were for searches into Gerald Goines. But part of the reason that they're so easy to get is because you have a police officer, Keith, who is swearing before the judge. It's not anybody. This is a member of law enforcement. You expect them to be honorable. And they're the ones. That's why they'll sign off on them pretty quickly. Am I correct with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Mario, this is something that you and I spoke about a couple weeks ago when I said that this is going to have a huge impact on the citizens of Harris County and their feelings about the Houston Police Department and law enforcement in general.
That reminds me of something. For the first time today, and I've been doing this 25 years, I had an officer approach a judge while I was sitting in court to get a warrant signed, and the judge made the officer orally recite the facts. I've never seen that before. And he had to stand up there for about 10 minutes and explain to the judge everything that went on in the case. And she asked him questions. And when I walked out of court, I said, hey, I've never seen a judge do that before. He's like, yeah, I never wasn't ready for that. They usually just read it and sign it. So it's already having an impact on what's going on down there at the courthouse.
Well, and it's had a bigger impact. I mean, I think because of this very case, no-knock warrants have suddenly been greatly on the decline. Agencies throughout Texas, I believe, have changed policies as to when this is done, and it's really a move to restrict when this happens.
And Keith, the way it happens now in Texas, or excuse me, with HPD, is that you have to have the signature of the chief to make it happen.
They made that change.
Right. And in New York City, to give you an example, they would force the officer to go get it signed by the judge. Then they would sign off on it because they didn't want that warrant to change between their signature and before the judge actually signs off on it.
Okay, so we know the trial obviously started on Monday. We want to go ahead and talk about opening statements. Let's look at the defense's first opening statement. Let's take a listen.
He swore, I've been investigating Harding Street for 2 weeks. Evidence shows that's a lie. He swore that on January 27th, a confidential informant paid by Gerald Goines bought heroin at that address. Evidence shows that's a lie. He swore to that judge on January 27th, he observed a confidential informant go into that home and buy heroin and swore there's more heroin in the house. That's a lie. He also swore that the male selling those drugs in that house had a 9mm pistol. That's a lie. He also swore that Officer Bryant, the one that mobied the door, who you're going to hear from in this trial, he swore that Officer Bryant was with him and observed this buy, observed these drugs. That's a lie. And then finally, he swore to that judge, looking at him eye to eye, and said, this must be a no-knock search warrant. Because if we don't execute this as a no-knock search warrant, we're going to put the police in danger, and it's going to affect our investigation.
Okay, that obviously was the state's opening statement, the prosecution there. Let's break this down. Let's give it a grade.
Well, you know, I'm not an attorney, but I've seen you
try to play one on TV.
No. But I just look at it from the demonstrative standpoint. You have, imagine if you will, you have all these people coming into this trial. If you're a juror, you're walking in and you're seeing these lights and you're seeing a camera and you see a judge and you see the lawyers and you see the alleged bad guy. And you're like, how did I get here? But they're not showing that. So you almost have to take the time to really bring the jurors into, hey, this is the judge, this is what's going to happen, we're doing this now. And I don't think you can go quickly through the actual presentation. And from my perspective, as someone who has to listen for a living professionally, I think that's always powerful to really go slowly and hammer your points. What you saw with Keaton, and I'm sure he's a fine attorney, but in this type of case, it's a lie. It's a lie. That's a lie. And it wasn't really, in my personal opinion, truly sold. But he did get the facts out there. It was a quick opening statement, too, by the way. Something like 25 minutes there.
All right. Okay. Yeah, we want to hear what the defense had to say in their opening statement. Do we have that as on tape as well? Okay. Yeah. Let's listen into that real quick.
And the truth of the matter is that the cause of Nicholas and Tuttle's death is Tuttle and Nicholas. The truth of the matter is that the first and only act clearly dangerous to human life was done by Dennis Tuttle. The truth of the matter is that Gerald Goines never made it into the house at 7815 Harding Street and was shot in the face by Dennis Tuttle as he tried to go in and rescue one of his colleagues. And the truth of the matter is that Gerald Goines said things in an affidavit which he presented to a municipal court judge that were not true. But this case is not a murder. It has never been a murder. This is a case of overcharging.
All right, defense attorney there, Nicole DeBoard, had a lot to say in defense of her client, even admitted that Goines had his faults. Casey, your thoughts on her?
So I thought it was interesting that she almost conceded that he did in fact lie, and that the jury was not going to like what they were going to hear regarding that. However, the argument that she made is the argument that I anticipated that she was going to make, and that is the causation argument. Because this is not a normal murder. This isn't a, I'm pulling a gun out and shooting you because I'm upset murder. This is a, I committed a different felony, and the state has to prove that because I committed that different felony, that was the cause of the death. And what the defense is arguing essentially is that that was not the cause, but that instead it was Dennis Tuttle firing his weapon that was the cause of the death.
Gotcha. Okay. Rick, your thoughts?
Nicole did a fine job, and the easy part of this case for the state and the easy part of the opening statement by the state is to prove the underlying felony, tampering with a governmental document. The really hard part of the case, and I told you this yesterday, and the heavy lifting that's coming for the state, and the defense is going to pick that apart, is proving the causation element. I think it's a stretch. I don't think they're going to be able to get there, and it's just my prediction, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a hung jury or a not guilty.
All right, 2 on the board. You had my opinion already with regards to what we saw in the prosecution. Your thoughts on the state, Kevin?
Well, I think the mistake that the state made with opening, I think they did a good job in putting together how point A led to point Z, the end, the death of the two. But I think what they failed to do was really embrace the problem for them in this case, which is there was someone in that house who is the deceased who came out firing and who shot 4 police officers in the course of this. And to not really accept that as a problem and address it in opening, I think set up the defense to really come in and hammer that exact same causation issue.
Well, it's obviously something that we're going to see continue to play out throughout the course of this. You're going to see the styles change. I mean, courtrooms are the theater of the unexpected, right?
Yes.
And a lot of time you have people adjust their style as they see the trial continue to proceed, Keith.
Yeah, okay. We'll take a quick pause here. I know we have more witnesses to talk about, people who showed up actually in the courtroom. We're going to talk about that in about 2 minutes. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the bench, your place to go inside the trial of Gerald Goines. After opening statements, cameras for the media were turned off. We won't be allowed to record anything until closing arguments. There was a lot of testimony that came out, though. Mario, Houston police officers playing a really big role in this case. We already mentioned former police chief Art Acevedo, but which one of them stands out the most?
To me right now, it's Rick Bass. He is the SIU Special Investigations investigator who really broke down the lie of Gerald Goines by doing a methodical, excellent job of piecing this all together and really asking key questions and going on a fact-finding mission until he discovered that, wow, this warrant appears to be based completely on lies. You have experience with him.
Yes, I worked with him on a capital murder that I was handling when I was a prosecutor at the district attorney's office, and he is methodical. He is very good at his job, and he will leave no stone unturned.
And he's not rattled, Keith, by defense attorneys. And that's something that you see a lot of officers get rattled. He wasn't rattled. He almost like embraced it and just said, keep on asking questions. I've got answers all day for you.
I remember you describing not argumentative at all.
No, just informative.
Informative. Okay, good description there. Okay, day 2, first big name of the trial came. That was District Attorney Kim Ogg. You all have been in trials plenty of times. What kind of message does that send when the DA comes in and sits behind her prosecutors?
Well, first I'd say that, in my opinion, this is a political prosecution. He has federal charges that are going on. They should have let the charges be handled by the feds and then make a decision later on to see what would happen. But at the time these charges were filed, there was a lot of political pressure on her. She was running for re-election. But it's sending a message to the jury, I think, that she's involved in the case. And there's been a lot of criticism of her in talking to the media, and it affects me because in the Armstrong case, I talked a lot to the media and they complained about it. But now in this case, she's talking to the media as much as she can. So I think she's just trying to send a message to the jury that she's involved in the case.
But doesn't the jury have to know who she really is?
I think they do. I think they do.
I mean, there could be some people that they hear the name, but they don't actually recognize them until they get into the courtroom. That's the other component. It's not like she's introduced. It's not like saying, "Oh, here comes the district attorney."
Yeah.
They just come in, walk, and just sit behind.
What kind of confidence does it give her prosecutors, though? I would imagine.
I think it puts more pressure on them, honestly.
Okay.
If I were the prosecutor in that courtroom and my boss came and sat right behind me, I'd feel like, she was breathing down my neck. So, yeah, it's more pressure for those prosecutors, in my opinion.
I've always thought she should have tried the case, but that's just my opinion.
Kevin, the message?
I think it's in support of the prosecutors. These prosecutors can handle that kind of pressure. And I would disagree as to this being a political prosecution. I think any elected DA throughout the state of Texas, if it came out that there is an officer that is lying on warrants and that is essentially planting evidence, every DA that I know would want to go after that officer in a court of law. And I think that's what she's doing.
And what you saw with officers in the terms of the testimony of this case, I want to talk about one in particular. It was Marcia Todd. She had questions. She was the lieutenant, if you remember, about Gerald Goines being in his hospital bed. They were saying, hey, we need to find out about the confidential informant. It all goes back to that warrant. We need to know who your CI was. And she tells the story about how Goines writes a name like onto the piece of paper, right? And he is in his hospital bed. He's been shot. He's recovering. He's been through surgery. He's got everything wired up, but he's writing it down, and then he tears the piece of paper up. She notices that he's struggling with it, so she grabs it from him and then just continues. She goes, don't worry, we'll take care of this. She goes outside the room and then pieces it all together. And then they get this name Reese. So then they go back in, and that's where it all started here with regards about, you're talking about officers, right? This particular officer who knew Goines very well, who sent him the information, she's now trying to figure out who is this person, and that's where this kind of got going from there.
Your thoughts on it? Please weigh in, all of you.
Well, I mean, I think it's good police work by her trying to figure out what's going on. I think they started to suspect there was something really wrong going on here, and they did their job.
I mean, if you were to write a police cover-up, this is the kind of thing that you would write, tearing up notes, piecing them together, having to find receipts in cars. I mean, I think it was an excellent investigation on the part of HPD.
A good investigation aside from the fact that we have body camera footage that we don't have. And if we don't have that body camera footage, what else don't we have?
Yeah, it's a great documentary.
So what happens next tomorrow and through the end of the week, the rest of the week? Tomorrow is Friday, so the rest of the week.
Well, tomorrow's day 5. I honestly didn't expect to see Stephen Bryant this early. So that was one big witness. I thought they were going to build up to him. He's off the stand. You're going to be seeing more witnesses, obviously, from the defense to really drill down and show that this was a lie. And eventually they're going to have to make that pivot to the case, you were telling me yesterday, the case for murder.
Yeah, and what I'm curious to see is what witnesses they call and how they think they're going to be able to prove that but for the tampering with the evidence, the murders occurred. It's very novel. It's kind of a unique prosecution. And I'm really curious as a defense lawyer to see how they're going to make that pivot, as Mario said.
Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, I think what they're doing is embracing the idea that it's okay to shoot at officers coming in executing a search warrant, or at least it's understandable, which is not something you hear from the prosecution very often. I think had they lived, they would have certainly been charged with an aggravated assault of a peace officer, and now they're normalizing it.
And very quick here, these are people who are at home. Last time I checked, your constitutional right allowed you to be inside your home. And they were just enjoying their time at home. And all of a sudden, you had all these people just go through their doors unannounced. And that's what has to be remembered here.
And because we don't have the body cams or the entry into the house, we don't know what was said. Did they yell out HPD? Did they yell out police? What did those people know as they came in the house? Did they think they were burglars? They didn't know.
I've been in that house, Keith. It's small. It was dark. There were hoarders. There was not much move to move around, and it was a very small hole to get in if you're a set of officers. This case still has a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Big case, cannot forget the victims. Yes, Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. Okay, all of you, thank you all so much. And Mario is going to be back in the courtroom tomorrow morning. We're going to have recaps tomorrow night of this very evolving case. I want to thank our excellent panel for being here. We look forward to working with you all over the next few weeks. Remember, we will continue to bring you minute-by-minute updates from the courtroom on click2houston.com. Just click on the bench section from the homepage. There you're going to also find everything else you need to know about this trial. For the bench team, thanks and have a good night.